Hi, I'm Paul Baltzell. I am the Vice President of Strategy and Business Development for Salesforce. I'll be your moderator today for this roundtable on cloud adoption. I'd like to introduce our distinguished guests, Mark Raymond, the Chief Information Officer for the state of Connecticut, and John Quinn, the Chief Information Officer for the state of Vermont. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us and being here today to discuss how we might help people move to the cloud. I would like to start the conversation around your ultimate goal for your state's cloud. Mark, why don't you take this one first? What's your state's cloud look like when you have achieved your vision of it?
Well, in Connecticut, it's if you think about innovation, they talk about fast, first movers and fast followers. I think we're sort of slow followers. We've been working with a cloud environment for some time, but we're slowly getting in and trying to make that the right decision for us, given our fiscal climate. But what I think at the end of the road for us, what we're looking for is really a multi-vendor environment, multi-vendor cloud that we can move workloads from one area to another, to handle the sort of changing and balancing the dynamics of what's happening in the industry, what's happening with our demand. I think having all of your eggs in one basket is going to be a really difficult place for anyone to be, and create far too much risk for a state. From a general cloud, we'd like to be in 2. We know that there's sort of specific kinds of things for software as a service that we're going to get from multiple different places. I just think it's going to be a horror for us if we're in 5 clouds and having to move data around from one to the other in order to achieve our business outcomes. So that's one of the things that we're really trying to avoid is making some strategic decisions about where we get the most value, and not replicate some of the the data and the processing and the agency by agency silos that we have in our on-premise environment.
Great, thanks, Mark. So John, same question to you. What does your state's cloud look like when you've achieved your ultimate vision of it?
Right, so I'll start back a couple of years ago. It was probably 5 or 6 years ago. We started moving things to our private cloud. As a state, as an executive branch, focusing on moving things to one specific cloud internally. From there, our approach is to pivot to the public cloud, but not put all of our eggs in one basket, like Mark said. We want to focus on things that we're good at, and the data center space, being a commodity space, isn't something that we want to focus on. So our strategy is to move our private cloud to the public cloud, and we've been doing that over the past couple of years, slowly moving applications, slowly moving some of our infrastructure to two primary vendors, and really working with them to take over that stuff. We've done everything from outsource our mainframe to focus on the planning for moving our agency of human services and all of their virtual environment to a public cloud. So our focus in the end will be not to be in the data center business anymore, and to outsource that to someone who focuses on that mission.
Great, thank you so much. Now we're going to jump into, can you tell me a little bit more about your enterprise strategy for your move to the cloud? You guys touched on it a little bit in your first answer. John, can you take this one first?
Sure. So for us, again, as I had said, we developed an approach of bringing things in-house and then slowly moving to 2 primary public cloud offerings. Since the agency was created, we've looked at multiple platforms, not only in the data center space for where we want to move our data center and our virtual environments, but specific platforms to start to consolidate applications and think about, like things, like technologies, and how we can find some synergy between those things to focus the data on providing better outcomes to lawmakers, executive branch leaders, as well as the public. So we're focused on specific platforms to try to move, whether it's be case management, constituent management, document management, those things into specific areas, either software as a service or infrastructure as a service.
To kind of give you that full view of the customer.
That's right.
Right, makes absolute sense. Mark, you want to take that one now?
Yeah, that doesn't sound overly dissimilar. You know, we started in really our cloud journey in software as a service, and started with some, you know, point solutions, really things that were emerging that, you know, we didn't really want to be in the business of. So, you know, our sex offender registry, our open data portal, our overall portal are things that we moved really as sort of point solutions out to the cloud. I'd say the last year, you know, we've really escalated the effort, and we grew by leaps and bounds when we moved our collaboration suite out to the cloud. And I can tell you it's one of the best things that we did in especially in our sort of COVID world, you know, where, you know, we're able to utilize wherever people were, you know, access to our tools and collaboration tools and data and documents to allow us to be as productive as we can. Having security out there made a huge difference for us in making that happen in a secure way. And I'd say that, you know, in the last 6 months, you know, we've started to look at sort of the transformational side of some of these initiatives. So we, in a 6-month period of time, we launched our first you know, a business one-stop where we're bringing together multiple different agencies using the Salesforce platform to create for our citizens an easy way to reopen their business if they had to close it during COVID, or open their business if they're coming to Connecticut and establishing themselves, and really using that to hide the seams between our agencies and make it easier for someone to open or grow their business.
Wow, that's awesome. Thank you both. So that leads into kind of our next question, and you actually kind of mentioned it there, Mark. How have you used Salesforce or other similar applications as a part of your cloud strategy? Mark, I feel like you almost answered that, but are there other things you'd like to add to that?
It's an evolution, right? It's you know, for us, it's learning about what those capabilities are, and it's you being ready with a right set of tools, and that means for us as CIOs, you know, being aware of how the changing market is, and what cloud capabilities come to bear, and that's a daunting exercise. They sprout up every day, and being able to sift between, you know, some of the different offerings and what they mean and the value they create is it's more than a full-time job.
Great, yeah, definitely. Everything's changing every day. It seems like there's something new for us to think about. So John, same question to you. How have you utilized Salesforce or other similar apps as a part of your cloud strategy?
So my vision for Salesforce is really focused on case management and state government. When we look across Vermont, we have over 1,400 applications. We have close to 200 different case management, constituent management applications or processes. Those things fit very nicely into a Salesforce platform. When we talk about in state government in Vermont about, you know, like platforms and trying to make sure that we have the right skill sets internally to be able to manage these things, but also sustain these things long term, Salesforce makes perfect sense for the state of Vermont. We're able to do things in a nimble, you know, quick fashion without a lot of headache. Through the COVID experience, we've stood up 20 new applications through Salesforce, and it's really given us, you know, a lot of, I wouldn't say leverage, but a lot of backing as far as, you know, getting the customers used to what Salesforce looks like. Everyone's kind of, you know, hesitant when you think about new technology and new platforms, especially when the CIO tells you you're going to move to, you know, this platform, and there's no more of this cherry picking, you know, what has the, you know, brightest red background and looks the prettiest. but we've proven that this is a platform that works for us and helps us move from that old legacy technology to a modern platform that will be sustainable long term.
Yeah, so I chuckle on that, John, and I know all three of us know that, having been in that situation, sometimes the medicine that's best for the kids isn't the one they necessarily want to take.
Yeah.
Right. So that leads into another question, which really is about, how do you get that buy-in? So how did you get the buy-in from your agency stakeholders for the move to the cloud, as well as obviously the governor's office, right? Usually the most important buy-in anyone can get. John, do you want to take that one first?
Yeah. So we started with what my staff refers to as a one-pager, really, where we lay out the platform strategy. We laid it out at the cabinet level, and you get a lot of people looking around the room thinking like, what does this mean for me? Why is this important? Why are we talking about it with the governor in a cabinet meeting, right? And the second piece of it is really proving yourself, proving that the technology is there for you and can do what you say it can do in the fashion that you want it to work. And I think through our COVID experience, it did just that. We were fairly new to Salesforce. We had bought licenses no more than 6 months before COVID, and we're fairly new. And the governor's office, as well as the rest of the cabinet members, I think we're a little skeptical about how often I talked about Salesforce and what it could do for us. But within the first 2 months, standing up things like PUA for unemployment insurance and being one of the first ones online and being able to adapt and build new things in a hurry to be able to turn around and provide these services to the citizens that we weren't capable of doing before, proved right away that this was a technology that was going to be not only useful to state government, but needed in order to get us through this pandemic.
Wow. So, and that's, it really isn't in our question list, but it is something, I think I would even say, and I'll kind of throw this out there, Mark, before we jump to you, and I'd like your input on this as well. It seems like the COVID experience we've all gone through, right? I mean, I left state after COVID started, so I experienced a bit of it myself in Indiana. The challenges there, and the fact that, as we've seen, most of our states have been able to, survive, get people out working remotely. I feel like there's been a level of credibility we've gained with technology because we did successfully do that. And when I say we, I say it feels like all of our peers here at NASIO, right, have had been able to accomplish that and get people out, as tough as that was, right? When your whole workforce, it goes from being a fraction of your workforce out there to everybody. I don't know. That wasn't really on our question list, but John, you mentioned that, and I felt like as we go to it, if you guys want to respond to that as well, Mark, if you want to hit it, and then John, if you've got something on that thought-wise.
Yeah, that super resonates, and I think while we've put a dent into sort of citizen perceptions, I think the internal perceptions of we can be doing technology a lot more quickly and a lot more efficiently using these kinds of tools and approaches. I mean, whether it's a form that allows us to reopen or certify a business that's open, or apply for a small business loan associated with COVID relief. Like, these are things that we did in hours and then made them available, and really raise the credibility of what some of the tools are that we were using, but that technology wasn't something that you had to spend 9 to 12 months doing to create business value. And in these sort of emergent times, that's super critical.
John, did you have thoughts on that before I let Mark answer the original question?
No, we'll go ahead and let Mark go.
So Mark, back Sorry to take us a little off track there, guys. So the question was around agency stakeholders and the move to the cloud. How did you get that buy-in from them in the governor's office as well?
Well, we started with great buy-in right from the very top. So Governor Lamont came into office, brought with him a chief operating officer, Josh Jabal, who were super supporters of the concept behind the cloud and the idea that, in many ways, the infrastructure, the approach, the architecture is evergreen, right? It's constantly being updated, and that need to stay alive and current comes along with the offering. It's one of the things that we're not particularly good at in state government. We looked around and see a lot of what we have is deferred maintenance and systems that hadn't been well taken care of. And so being a part of that delivery stream sort of forces in an effective way people to stay current. So that was the easy part. The harder part was, sometimes the complexity of government business practices don't nicely fit in the box of what some of the offerings are, and they got put place by regulations or laws, and so they're harder to change. And so, I think if for some of the efforts that we have, we're stretching the boundaries of some of the cloud offerings because they don't match the complexities of some of the things that we're doing in government. And so now we have our agency supporters who want these kinds of benefits, but we're turning around and looking and saying, well, we really should change that business process before we try and do that. So it's an interesting time for us.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. So the last one, kind of on the strategy, as security is always a concern, right? I mean, I believe it was #1 again on the NASCIO list, the top 10. I think it has been for, I can't even remember how many years. Did you guys have any major hurdles in overcoming any potential concerns from the business units in the move to the cloud? Mark, do you want to take this one first?
Sure. One of the things that we put together super helpful for us was a cloud questionnaire, in that we covered a bunch of security elements as a part of that, and that process of inspecting what kind of data are you putting there, how are you securing it today, how do you need to keep it secure, made it less around the technology that we were putting in place and more around what we were trying to enable. And through that came out from an outcome, if you're putting it in the cloud and doing it right, chances are it's more secure than we're able to do on premise. I'd say that the challenge, the flip side of that is, in some ways proving that, right? So being able to take third-party attestations of how they're following security protocols, getting our auditors and our regulators to buy into that has taken us some time. I think they're there now, but cloud providers don't want you walking around the data centers doing inspections, right? And so, for all of us, that makes a huge amount of sense. And so, that was one aspect. The other is identity management, like making sure that we have a consolidated way of knowing who each person is across all these different functions is made much easier by being able to leverage some of these cloud properties. And so, both understanding who can get in and how they're doing it, and if someone's in that's not supposed to be, noticing that very quickly. So we think that we've for the things we've moved there have rapidly improved our security posture for those things, and we have a lot more work ahead.
Great, thanks, Mark. And John, what about you on the cybersecurity front, and how cybersecurity concerns from the business units?
Yeah, so we start with a group called the Procurement Advisory Team that's made up of people all across state government. Each contract, each RFP that comes along goes through that group. Our CISO sits in that committee every week and goes through these contracts and looks for things like, our SaaS and cloud solutions FedRAMP, NIST 853, IRS 1075, and goes through those things to make sure that, when the business asks us, we have this type of data, can we put it here? Or I don't think we can put it in this cloud because, we're, IRS 1075. we can say we've already done that work for you. We've already crossed those bridges, swam those channels. So fortunately for us, we're the single IT shop for state government, for the executive branch. And so all IT contracts come through us. And so we're able to establish those security concerns, or those establish those contracts early enough and address those security concerns before the business really gets a chance to look at some of these products.
Wow, thank you, John. I would add to that, just to give you guys some comfort. The team here at Salesforce, trust me, like my team at the state, neither one of them ever gave me access to anything. So nothing has really changed. Don't let Paul in anything; he could mess it up. So now we're going to get to one of the harder things we all deal with, talking about funding mechanisms. So what funding model have you used to pay for your move to the cloud? Bill back, appropriations, some other method? I'm going to start that one with John. Do you want to talk about that?
We're bill back. We're consumption based. So everyone that puts a workload into the cloud pays for that workload. And it's worked out fairly well. I think we're still trying to dial in expectations and learning about overages and how to better report to the business how those things are going to work and how they can track their costs a little bit better. I think some of that stuff still needs fine tuning, but we are almost fully in the bill back category for our cloud services.
John, can I just, for things that are common, right, that are used across many, or that you establish them on behalf of others, do you pay the cost for that? No, we find ways to bill them back. Maybe we get an allocation of a certain amount of storage for an application, and while it's an enterprise application and used across, we divvy it up by head count and say, okay, commerce, this is the amount that you get. After that, you're going to pay $2 a gigabyte or whatever it is, based on cost. But we try to bill everything back that we can and try to keep the stuff out of the allocation.
Mark, it's funny because you asked the exact same question I was going to ask. So Mark, with that, I'll throw it to you. How do you guys handle funding on that, right? Bill back, appropriations, what another method, right? I'm open to new ideas.
Yeah, and that's us. We are another method, and part of the reason why I was, curious about where John was is, we're making some of those transitions ourselves. We in Connecticut, we're a federated model, so we do some things centrally. Agencies do some things. Most of the IT funds are direct appropriated to the agency, but we have our own direct allocation. But since 2013, however, we've changed our investment in technology to be at least getting it off the ground is capital money. And so we have an enterprise IT capital fund. And when we have new initiatives that require some kind of one-time investment, we use that, and we can even to create what we're calling a new asset capability, and that asset capability needs to have a life for it. And the establishment cost in the first year of getting it stabilized, we can capitalize those things and then use that time to transition it into the ongoing budget and the operating budget. But we view our transformation as the creation of a new set of assets, and that sometimes our operational budgets can't handle that one-time change.
Great. Wow. All good stuff. So leading to the next question, how did you convince either? Go ahead.
Before you get there, I just want to say, one of the pressures that we've been under is that allocated space. So, in the times that we're in now, everyone's asked to reduce their budget by 5% or 3%. They look to those internal service funds like technology and say, well, you have to cut 5% too, right? Mm-hmm. But if it's bill back, I don't need to cut the bill back portion. I only need to cut my allocation portion. And so I've been taking more and more things out of the allocation, putting it towards bill back, and letting the agencies decide where they want to spend their money on those things. And we've done that with all the things like email. And the one area that we really haven't done it in is networking, right? In your connectivity. But that's the main reason we've kind of moved more towards the bill back rather than the allocated model.
Thanks. That's actually great additional context. So how did you convince either budget or the agencies to support those funding models, right? In bill back, or whether it be, you know, the capital model, Mark, like, you know. So Mark, do you want to take that one first?
Sure. One of the difficulties is in many instances, it can cost more than we're spending today to run things in the cloud. And now we get better capability and better security, and in some instances it's cheaper, but you know, in our current time, saying, hey, we're going to move you to cloud and that's going to cost you a bit more, that's a hard pill to swallow. So, you know, part of that is we need our cloud providers to meet us where we are and help us to flexibly understand that perhaps the charge everyone the same amount doesn't help us solve for getting into these new offerings, and that we may need a ramp up period of time or different ways to flexibly think about that. And we've had some moderate success in having those conversations with our cloud partners to get them think a little differently about their one-to-many model, and say where to get us in, it takes a different kind of thinking. So for us, it's been a combination of having that flexibility from our vendor partners, and then also demonstrating the value of being current or that we're not able to get to on our own.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark. John, thoughts on that around how did you get the budget and the agencies buy-in on supporting the funding for cloud? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, you know, I'm trying to think of the right way to say it. You know, the IT organization and these type of funding models have been around for a long time, right? So when we talk about moving to the cloud, our strategy has been trying to keep our price the same. So, you know, our internal private cloud costs, we've been trying to match with the public cloud. So when we make that shift, there's not a huge increase to the customer, and we can let them focus on their business need and let us focus on the technology, right? We're trying to keep them out of the technology decisions on who the vendor is and, you know, what the platform is, and really, you know, having them focus on outcomes and having us focus on the back end stuff. So I try not to talk a lot about cloud strategy to the customers. It's more about you know, better redundancy, more uptime, more, you know, higher skilled people in that specific area taking care of those applications that you need the most. Those are the things that I try to talk about, and I try to stay out of the cost conversation where we can. Where we can't stay out of it, again, we try to focus on all the positive things and say, you know, this is a needed thing. We help them by going to finance and management with them and talking about the benefits and talking about the longer term strategy that rolls up to the governor's strategy. So each agency has a strategy that aligns with the governor's strategy, including the Agency of Digital Services. So one of our things is shutting down our data centers, reducing by 50% by 2021, reducing the number of legacy applications, so many per year. So when you look at that and you can align it to the strategy of the governor, it makes it a lot easier to convince finance and management to give these agencies the money they need.
Thanks. Yeah, it's definitely a balancing act in that move, because you've got capital investments in the bill back model, and then you're trying to move to, you know, the next thing, and that's always a tough challenge. So with that, I think we are I believe at time. So I'm going to ask one last question, gentlemen. Are there any key pieces of advice or lessons learned that you would like to offer to others as they move to adopt the cloud? John, do you want to take that one first?
Don't be afraid. You know, look at what your skill sets are internally, and figure out where you want your focus to be. Where can you use the limited resources you have? Do you want to spend, you know, your resources on things that can be bought, you know, as a commodity now, or do you want to focus your resources in areas that you know, may be beneficial in the long run, or get you to a sustainable modern platform, right? So, you know, think about where you want your resources to be long term.
Mark, do you want to take that same question? What would be your key piece of advice?
Yeah, I mean, you use the opportunity to simplify. I mean, John made a great point about reduction of portfolio. Like the more that we reduce the number of applications, and you know, it makes it more supportable for the state staff. So, you know, look at each one of those as from a sustainability point of view, and not necessarily thinking about cheaper, right, but thinking about better and more sustainable and more supportable. I'd say the other piece of advice is, you know, look critically at your own team for the skills that you may need to bring to bear that are changing, right? So, you know, networking, multi-cloud, how to move workloads, engineering these different practices that contain cost and manage cost. It's a different set of disciplines than we have within our internal environments, and don't overlook those. They're not insurmountable, but look very critically at your own team skills and get the additional assistance you need to make that a successful transition.
We're going to close up. I'd like to thank both Mark and John for being here and talking to us today about cloud adoption. And with that, we'll leave you. Thank you.